Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Today, we're going to look forward to 2022 and project planning and readiness and getting our organizations ready for upcoming information governance and auto classification projects. So welcome. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. So Sandy and I are online. Sandy's going to be on mute right now. And so I can't see any questions that are coming up. So we are very comfortable at interrupting each other. So if there's any questions as we go on, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat window, and either one of us will keep an eye out for it. So welcome. By introduction, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP Marketing and Business Development at Velora Technologies, and joining us is Sandy Surkes, who is the co-founder and CEO of Velora. So welcome everyone this afternoon. We are just about done our 2021 webinar series. I cannot even believe what happened to 2021, but here we are at the end of October. So we've only got one more webinar in our series that's coming up in December, which is advanced implementation. So I would encourage you to register for that if you have not done so already. As kind of a next step after this project planning and readiness, it's the what now. And then again, if you need to refresh on anything that you may have missed throughout the year, everything is available on demand on our website. So I encourage you to go and check back if you've missed something. I also, before we get started, I also want to do just a bit of a plug, because coming up next week, we are releasing a white paper / ebook written in collaboration with Sandy and some friends at EY, Eric Dirk and Carolyn Higgins, releasing the ebook called Top 10 Reasons IG Projects Fail. So best practices, lessons learned, and some tips to keep projects on track. So that's coming on Monday. So I would suggest going to the site. You can pre-register for it, or hit the website up on Monday and you can download it from there. But just want to give a little plug. For those who, let's move on. For those who are new, perhaps to Velora, just a bit of an intro about us and what we do. We allow organizations to locate, identify, and action content in any place across the enterprise. We have an enterprise-grade SaaS platform, so the technology that we use for auto classification. We bring expertise with methodology and best practices from our fantastic PS team. And we also bring over 20 years experience. So Sandy co-founded the business 20 years ago, and we kind of build on that 20 years of brilliant knowledge. So thank you, Sandy, for that. Some of the clients that we work with, you'll probably find yourselves here anywhere where there is a lot of content. So regulated industries, large corporations, in-house legal teams, outsourced legal teams, and then clearinghouse and data processors as well. So let me give you a bit of an auto classification refresh, just if anyone is here and might be new to auto classification. The difference about this webinar is we're not getting into the nitty-gritty details of auto classification, the technology, the different implementation. What we're talking about really is project planning and how to get your organization ready for implementing an auto classification solution throughout. But let's start back at the beginning with a 5-minute refresh on auto classification. So what is it? It is a software platform, essentially, that marries rich metadata and rules and answers the question, like, what is this thing I'm looking at? And then what do I want to do with it? So the first thing it does is it does a full content text analysis to look for file and rich metadata attributes. So right out of the gate, what we see on files is file metadata. What is it, the file? What is the created date? What's the path name? What's the last modified date? What's the extensions? The PDF is an Excel. What that tells us is information about the file, but it doesn't tell us anything about the content or what's in the file. So rather than a last modified date or created date, we can now get granular with if it's a contract, what's the signature date? What's the effective date? What's the destruction date or expiration date? What's the renewal date? What language is it in? Who is it involving, who's the to, who's the from, and what are the parties involved. So depending on what those little data facets are and what you're looking for, it's going to pull out that file and rich metadata. When it does that, it now allows us to determine the doc type through recognition algorithms. So, maybe it's a service, maybe it's an effective date or a terms and condition that's going to tell us it's a contract or a service agreement or a cash flow statement. Whatever that is, it's going to pull those facets out and determine the doc type. And then once we know the doc type, then we're able to layer on top of that disposition algorithm. So those are the rules or the actions. So if this is a contract, keep for 5 years and put it in the vault. If it's a cash flow statement, mark it as finance and keep it for 3 years, as an example. So once you understand what it is, you can have those disposition rules dictate just about anything. You can move it, you can delete it, you can sequester it, you can redact it, you can translate it. Whatever you need to do is the disposition algorithms will do that for you. So that's kind of the technology, but the technology is really married with the methodology because, it's not like you can hand over a set of keys to somebody and say, have at her, implement an auto classification solution in your organization. There is then kind of method behind the madness. So the first thing auto classification solution will do is crawl and locate. And this will help to identify for you as an organization to identify, what do I have? Because our data is everywhere, siloed in cloud, on-prem, apps, file shares, unstructured data, structured data, it really is everywhere. So this allows the business, your business, to understand, what do I have and where is it? Once we understand all the different locations, then we can identify each piece of content. We can tag it, what is this thing? We'll tag it, we'll determine the doc type like we saw there, and we'll tag for customized keywords. Then this will give us an opportunity to look and preview the document. So really understand, what am I looking at? Maybe it's a JPEG that's unreadable and needs to OCR. Maybe it's in a different language and we need to understand what it is in English. It will really give us this view to view everything, kind of see very high level dashboard reporting, and really have an understanding, that 10,000 foot view of what my content is. And then from there, we can decide an action and what to do with it. So this is kind of implementing retention rules, or perhaps other data content rules. What do you want to do with it? If it's, security needs to be locked down, who should have access? Where should it live? Is this piece of content under legal hold? Does it, is it part of a regulatory compliance that we have to make sure that we're on side with? So once we understand what it is, again, we decide in action what to do with it. And then auto classification and implementing a solution like this isn't a one and done. Of course, you're going to have projects and different groups working within the platform, but it really is an ongoing assessment of any new content that's being created. So it's kind of monitor and audit. So this Delta processing or Delta monitoring. So what has been new? What is new? What has been edited? What are values that may have changed within a document that will dictate what new metadata needs to be applied, or perhaps what new rules need to happen and need to be processed. So we find with most clients the use cases are kind of fit into these big three, and you'll kind of see yourselves here probably somewhere. The first is information governance. So kind of reducing data records to what we need, raw processing, retention, workflow automation. Those are kind of the use cases you'll see in that bucket. Under compliance, you'll see, data discovery, adhering to privacy regulations, identifying PII, or perhaps actioning DSAR requests for GDPR, CCPA as an example. And then the third bucket is legal and finance. So reducing effort, reducing turnaround time for data discovery, for e-discovery, identifying things that are on legal hold, or certain content that needs to be on legal hold. So this is where we usually see most folks using an auto classification solution within their enterprise. And some of the benefits that you'll see when using auto classification can really be felt across the organization. So the first is absolutely productivity. It's going to save time and effort, increase productivity in groups, in teams, and everybody kind of showing up to do their work every day. It's accessible. So in an auto classification solution, all of that content across the organization is going to stay exactly where it is. And auto classification is going to allow us to have this single pane of glass visibility into every single piece of content in the organization. So the benefit to leaving everything where it is that you don't always have to kind of find where it's moved to. It is organized, it's streamlined and organized by document attributes. So, you know, we don't care if it's a Word doc or a PDF, but we do care what kind of document it is, and therefore we can organize and find things better. It is permissioned, so only those people who are allowed to see things will be seeing things based on user permissions existing in your organization. It is automated so that, you know, a human doesn't have to make those decisions anymore. If it's this document type, do this with it. And it takes that, again, increases productivity and takes that load off a human. It is perpetual in nature, so it is always running in the background, again, looking for new content or looking for edited content. It allows us to understand and be alerted when new content maybe is in the wrong place or perhaps isn't locked down where it should be, or something has been updated, whether it be the piece of content or a policy. We can enact that right away. And it's also defensible. And that's a big one too for any organization. We need to understand if it was determined as a doc type and it was deleted, why was it deleted? So an audit trail that will kind of track actions and decisions against every piece of content is very important as well. So this is just kind of a handful of benefits of using auto classification in your organization. So that was hopefully 5 minutes or less. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is project planning and readiness. So I've kind of put it into kind of 4 buckets. So the first thing you're going to have to do is build your case. So where do you even start in trying to form a business case about why and how you need auto classification in your organization? Like, what's that risk? What's going to get that most attention from your organization? And then you got to build your team. So getting support from different stakeholders, or who else is going to be involved, and who do you need kind of around your table when you're making those decisions? And then building your budget. So how do you get budget alignment from different groups? And how do you get that okay, kind of like across the line for your organization? And then, you know, once you've got all that, how do you build your plan? So where do you even start? How do you realize fast ROI? How do you get things implemented? And how do you prioritize the rollout in your team and in your group? So let's start with building your case. So where do you even start? So a good place to start is, do I even need auto classification? You know, am I a large organization? Am I a smaller organization? Am I kind of coming up between all these problems that we see all the time? Or, you know, is it being managed okay with the tools that we have? Is it being managed okay with the team that we have? So some questions to ask yourself, like, do I even go down this path? Do I even dare go down this path? The first is multiple sources. Do you know that your content is everywhere? And that's, again, on-prem, cloud, different applications, unstructured file shares. You know, Susie retired 10 years ago and her hard drive sitting underneath your desk. You know, do you have multiple sources that you are needing to get a handle on? Can you find the content that you need and when you need it? How quickly and efficiently can you access content that you're looking for, whether it be a data request, whether it be looking for content that's part of a litigation or doing, you know, early e-discovery? Can you find the things that you are looking for quickly? And as you're doing those searches and that analysis, is there stuff that you're missing? That's a big one too, because if it's not where you think it's going to be, and it's required, especially for a DSAR request, if you're looking for PII or looking for litigation, it's very important if there's things that you are missing and you're unaware of. And when you do find stuff, is this the right one? Is this the final version? If I'm looking at 45 different versions that are in people's mailboxes and emailed and version 1 through whatever, which is the right one? Which is the final record or the final version? And is this potentially an information governance or some kind of privacy compliance risk, which is often the case? Am I doing things over and over? Am I always looking for the same kind of thing? Or am I always getting the same request from a certain group? Maybe it's the compliance team, maybe it's the IT team. Am I me and my team performing similar searches on a daily basis? And actually are other people in the organization, maybe just not my team? Is there a collective need and people are looking for different things across different organizations? So if you kind of see yourself here, this is a good, you're a good candidate for a larger scale auto classification solution. Now, what is the risk? Because, having the need is great, and you have the need, but how do you convince others in the organization and build that case to implement an auto classification solution? What is that high priority? So kind of like, what is that risk? So we're going to talk about a few in no particular order. There is an internal policy compliance. There is regulatory compliance. There's data privacy compliance and perhaps security compliance as well. So what's the most important in your organization? And really, it depends a lot on who you ask, right? So internal policy compliance, people who care about this the most, and what they kind of wake up every day and think about. If you're an IG or records manager, you're thinking about retention, you're thinking about storage, you're thinking about access to different things. If you are legal, you need good data hygiene, in the event of a litigation, or you're looking for e-discovery, or you're looking for things that are, should be under legal hold. That's kind of those internal policy compliance that we're talking about. And an example, if you're an HR manager, how are you treating the data that is sensitive? Maybe, of course, it contains PII, but, is it the CEO's compensation plan? Those are sensitive things that need to be locked down. And what is that risk of things like that being out there? Maybe you are compliance team. Maybe you're in a regulated industry, you're in oil and gas, you're in pharma, you're in healthcare, where documents and enterprise records need to be filed and stored correctly, and reporting to those governing bodies. And, you could be a CFO if you're financial, you could be a CISO if you're in another regulated industry, because the risk for this is real. You can face industry regulation fines for improper storage and access of documents that are important to your business. Data privacy compliance. You ask a data protection officer or a CIO or a CSO, what their biggest concern is, and it's absolutely the identification and the access for content that contains PII. And we all know now, with GDPR being a few years away and CCPA being new, that those fines are real, and we've seen fines in the millions of dollars. So, we need to be able to quickly perform DSAR requests, data requests, access to, request to delete, things like that. So that risk is very important for this group. And then, of course, on the security compliance side, you're looking at CISOs, you're looking at CSOs. Do the right people have the right access to sensitive content? And in the event of a data breach, what information was compromised? Who had access to it? And so that's very important for security compliance. And you'll see that the common thread amongst all these is, what is this piece of content? Where should it live? Who should have access to it? How long should this be kept from a risk and compliance kind of perspective? And kind of the big one is, how do we retrieve it should we actually need it? So if it is, legal and litigation, e-discovery, finding that information, how do I actually get it? I know it's here somewhere. How do I find it? So those are, those are kind of the common threads amongst these folks here. And then it's kind of your job to figure out what is the biggest priority. And that's, if you're sitting in IM or you're sitting in IG or you're the records manager, the importance of it, but perhaps you've identified that the biggest risk is data privacy compliance, or perhaps it's legal hold or e-discovery. So it's important to identify the greatest risk, but if you're not that person, if you're maybe in this person over here and that this is going to get the budget and the attention, how do you help everyone through that? And that's why it's important to start building your team, who you need in your court, and finding those allies internally to help you. So there is strength in numbers. So if you look around the organization, we kind of saw where those different risks, the risks lied, and the people who kind of cared about that, and you'll find them around the table here. So each piece of content that is created has a different value for each group. It means something different to records. It means something different to security. What access do we need to lock it down? It might mean something to legal hold. It's under legal hold, or it's part of a litigation. So the questions asked around here is, who owns the content and whose goal is most important? Again, back to that risk assessment, what poses the greatest risk? And then who owns that budget? But the common goal here is that each group really needs to be compliant with their mandate. And that's why people are kind of looking in these, kind of with their blinders on to say, well, I'm just concerned about legal hold. Well, I'm just concerned about records and, life cycle management. But the idea here is if we can kind of flip that and we kind of look at that from content management being everyone's shared responsibility. We've got shared content and shared goals. And the good thing about this is, when it is a shared responsibility, everyone thinks of it for the greater good. So it's not just a record. It's not just for legal hold. It's not just something that contains PII. Everything that we create is a shared resource, and therefore it's shared responsibility and can be a shared cost. And that's important when we're thinking about budgeting and where the budget is going to come for an investment. So the common goal here is really that centralized management and absolutely distributed benefits, because instead of working in silos or with blinders on, everyone's working together. And where to start? If you're in records, you want to make friends with the folks in legal or maybe CIO. If you're sitting in legal, you want to be friends with the people in records or in security and whatnot, because that those are the kind of the closest three groups that have those same issues. What am I looking at? What do I need to do with it? How long do we keep it? And where is it if I need to find it? So that's kind of the team that you need around the table. But when you think about implementing an enterprise-wide project and an enterprise-wide auto classification platform, who are those bums in seats that you're going to need every day to kind of wake up and think about it? And that's important as well. So Frontline, who do we need? We need somebody in IG. You need somebody who's going to almost be a project lead or champion the project. And this individual, it doesn't need to be one individual, it can be many individuals, but this team or individual needs to understand where everything belongs or what to do with it. Maybe it's the person who has created the records retention schedule. Maybe it's the person who understands where everything is going to be archived and how that's going to be used. The second one is your subject matter expert, or perhaps the champion or leader of a business line. And these are the folks who perhaps are maybe as the custodian or the owner of the data. Maybe it's, the sales department, or maybe it's, the HR manager, someone who knows what's going to be in the content. Now, this is kind of twofold. This person doesn't really need to be in the trenches every day, but they need to be available to answer questions. So, hey, I need your opinion on A or B, and that person to make a decision about the content. But they can also be a champion. So, if you're thinking of, different organizations as you roll out a solution, they can help you. They can help you in your IG seed be those champions as you roll it across the organization into different groups. And the third bucket here is you kind of need somebody in IT, because this is a technology solution that you're implementing. You don't want to go around IT, but you do want to have them involved. And their involvement will really be dependent on how you decide to deploy a solution like that, whether you're going to go in the cloud or whether you're going to deploy on-prem. So that will kind of dictate how much time or effort you will need from IT. But as you're going through your evaluation process, a good vendor should act as an extension of your team. And I think, to have the minimal amount of impact of your day-to-day team members is important, because you have jobs to do. You don't need, to worry about implementing something cross-functionally in an organization. You want to have a vendor that you can rely on to help you with that. Everybody good so far? I can't see any questions or chat. So Sandy, you just interrupt me when needed.
All good, Jen, and I'm giving little side commentary here in the comments box.
Oh, good.
I realized the first couple of comments I accidentally sent to you instead of everyone else. So sorry, folks. I got it together here on out. But no questions explicitly yet.
Good. Okay, perfect. Okay, so you're building your case, you've got your team, and now you need to build your budget. So how much is this going to cost anyway, right? And what kind of ROI can and should you expect in the first month, in the first year, ongoing? And it's not just a cost idea, it really is a people and efficiencies budget as well. So the first is, yeah, you need to invest in proper tools and proper technology that's going to help you there. And that's actual like real dollars out. But the second two, you are investing people's time in the assessment of a solution, in the collaboration and the teamwork. You're asking for people's time. So you got to kind of think about that and how much time is that going to take. And then there's actual, linear time. You're talking about implementing an auto classification solution in a very large organization. That's going to take time. And you got to respect the process. You got to respect that not everybody, this is not going to be top priority for everyone. Maybe it's been mandated that it's a priority, but you have to be respectful of people's time and the cycles that it takes to get everybody on board. So typically we see, between 8 to 18 months for an organization to go through their assessment, to build the case, to build the budget, to kind of build those priorities. So something to keep in mind too, it really is not an overnight, it's not an overnight decision. And, and the ability to respect that on the vendor side and internally on your side will be helpful. So let's talk turkey. So what I'm going to send after this webinar, I'm going to send you the real kind of the Excel docs that these come out of, because it's an interactive ROI calculator for a few different areas of a business. Again, if you think of, taking, legal, records, IT, security, data protection, all of those seats around the table, we've created an ROI calculator that will help you identify what that return on investment will be kind of for each of these categories. So the first one is, and the biggest, the fastest, I'll say, ROI is realizing and reducing ROT, which is redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. So I can't click on these yellow buttons, but you'll be able to click on those yellow buttons in the Excel sheet that I send you. So if you take a total number of files, in this example is 35 million, estimated total gigs of data, and an average 3,000 whatever files. If you take your hosting fees of active content, in this example, 5 gigs a month, you put what yours is, an estimated annual content hosting fee, what you're currently spending it will auto calculate what the guesstimate of what you're currently spending. If you know what that spend is, if you're in IT or if you have friends in IT that know that would be helpful. And then when most organizations run a ROT processing or ROS assessment, it's estimated that about 50% of the content that you're storing can be deleted. It's junk, it's past retention, it's dupes, whatever that is. So by reducing that content by 50%, that's going to bring down your storage costs, that's going to bring down the files that you're hosting. And here in a full cost auto classification effort, and this is assuming a tier 1, which is, entry level, but still enough processing power to get through everything, you're looking at a total return on investment of about 112%. Same thing with retention. If you kind of look at your content now, moving from ROT over to data retention, same thing here. You can put how many files you have, your estimated gigs, here's an example, total number of files tagged and classified for retention per person hour of effort. So this is not only now taking into account actual physical storage, it's taking cost of human bodies to do, data retention and to manually apply tags and whatnot. So if you put average salaries in, it will estimate your total loaded cost of labor. And with your years to auto classify, Sandy, am I reading that right? That it would be 4 years to classify.
I think that what's going on here is that I don't think it's supposed to be auto classified. I think it's supposed to be comparing manual. It would take the manual team 4 years to do.
That's it. That's what I was reading as well.
Yeah, I think that should just say classify.
Classification, yeah.
Yeah. Because the automation is going to do this in 1 year.
Exactly. Yeah. So your total cost savings for retention in that case is astronomical, which is now the numbers just become silly. It's like, how could you not? Here's the one that we often come across when looking at e-discovery, because that is a very pricey kind of department and task onto its own. So here again, you can input your different metrics here, and how many files per litigation or per matter, costs for that, how many litigation matters are you handling in a year. It will estimate the cost that you could be or probably are spending right now. And then your e-discovery cost reduction, if you are implementing auto classification, very similar to when we look at the ROT reduction, because you're not having to process and go through and e-discover 1,000, 100,000 things. You're only looking at and evaluating the content that has real business value, not the rot and not the junk. You're going to save time, and you're also going to save dollars as well. And then data requests. Quite often when folks are looking for an auto classification solution, yes, we need to get our house in order. Yes, we don't know what we have. We need to know where it is. But the ultimate goal is usually, how do I find stuff? How do I find it when I need it? So this data request ROI calculator, you can put in your total person hours. If I'm doing, let's say, a DSAR search, or perhaps I'm looking for something for litigation or e-discovery, put in the average number of hours that it would take you to do that, how many people you have on a team, how much are you paying those people on the team to do that. It will calculate the labor cost, the time cost, and then down here, you can look at your total return on investment cost. And kind of as a final slide to the ROI portion, and you'll see this when I send this to you after, is that if you take all those buckets and all those disciplines, if you share that cost across all disciplines, e-discovery, retention, litigation, data privacy, you'll see what that annual savings is. Because if you're sitting in IG, that legal is spending some amount to do this, that the folks in data privacy compliance are thinking and spending the same amount of money too. So if you can share that and share that across the business and prove and show that ROI can be shared, that is also, you can use that kind of as your ammo as well. So building your plan. You got your needs assessment, you know what the biggest risk is, you got your team and your stakeholders, how you're going to attack it, and you've even got the budget. So you've been approved for budget. So how do you eat that elephant? Because it is giant. You're talking about terabytes of data sitting across perhaps multiple locations, sitting across multiple countries. How do you start? So having a good vendor as a partner is a first start to help you set priorities. What content location or what custodian or group has the highest risk that we've already identified, and that will help us, where to start and what group to start with. So how do you roll out? It's baby steps. Again, you can't eat that elephant all in one bite. You just got to take it piece by piece. So first thing is first, you need, highly recommended that you start with a pilot, because this will prove the fastest ROI. You'll show the other kind of stakeholders in the organization that this was a good idea and that it's working and they're seeing what they need to see. And it will kind of build that foundation to help you grow. And when you're starting a pilot, again, you kind of set your priority, but again, you've got this larger scope of all the different groups in the organization. You always have an eye forward. So if we're starting maybe with a custodian or we're starting with a location, what's next? And you're always thinking, you're always doing what you need to do now, but you're always thinking about what's coming up, what's next. Does this group perhaps need these tags or these reports? Is this going to be helpful to this group? And then what are you going to need for future use cases so that you can already start and kind of preempt that planning and those needs. Third thing is certainly measure results. It's handy kind of when you go through that ROI calculator, it's going to be really handy knowing how you did it before, because that'll give you some kind of benchmark to say, this is how we used to do it. And this is what an auto classification solution can provide for us. Not only that, but also measure results in, the processing speed or the accuracy. That's also very important. Do you want a solution that's going to be it's going to be, yes, timely, it's going to be quick, but you need it to be accurate. So what are the accuracy of the results? And you're able to benchmark that and measure so that, again, it's technology and we can tweak it. So having an eye on results is, and the accuracy of that is key. And then also, as you kind of build and you scale, what is helpful? What are you missing? What would you rather see? What kind of reports are going to be important to you and to others in your organization? And as you ramp, you can kind of build and build on that success. So you can start with the pilot, maybe it's one group, and then you're going to expand because you've proved the ROI with maybe ROT. And then from that, you don't have to, again, it can be iterative. You can have a project plan and you can kind of set your priorities where to go, but should be nimble enough that if priorities change or if groups change, that you have that where to, and you're able to kind of pivot and say, okay, well, we started with this custodian, but now we're realizing high priority, now we need to do, HR for PII identification or something. But build on those successes so that other groups can take advantage of it. And then spread the word. So, if you've identified the priorities are, IG or records and legal and, perhaps the CISO's office, maybe there's a need in IT, maybe there's a need in other lines of business, because once you've got an auto classification solution, all of those groups can take advantage of it. It's not a per file, investment. It's a platform, it's a SaaS investment. So all groups can use it for a many number of things. So have showcases, host it for different lines of business. Hey, HR, this is how it's going. Do you guys have a need from that? And then if you're sitting in legal or in IG, you will be the hero because now the sharing is caring. You're sharing it with everybody else in the organization. So things to think about as well as you're kind of building your plan. Important topics to think about as an organization, either the person who is planning or who's going to kind of project manage that, or perhaps as you're going to different groups and getting that collaboration. But first thing is implementation and migration plans. So what's the best for your organization? And is the solution provider you're looking at flexible enough to accommodate and respect your data and content environments? So do you need something? Are you in an industry that requires you to be on-prem, or do you need it in your cloud, or are you okay in a third-party cloud? Those are important things to kind of identify right out of the gate. And then going forward, which systems are going to be used, for short-term and current content holders, as you're kind of if you are moving things around, where are things going to go? And do you need, are you going to implement a holding tank or, the sequestering data, or moving somewhere place first before you delete it? What are those places that you want to put data as either a kind of an interim holding or perhaps a long-term storage or archive? So where do those places need to go? Oh, there it is, long-term content management plans. So what are you going to use short-term? What are you going to use long-term? What are those systems that you need connecting to? Because quite often when we chat with people, they're like, well, we totally use Office 365. Awesome. Can guarantee all your content's not in there because you're probably using Slack and your HR department's using Workday and you probably have, emails maybe archived in Enterprise Vault. Yes, you are using Office 365 day to day, but your enterprise on a larger scale is using many, many content environments. And it's important to kind of gauge and assess, where you need to go and what those priorities are and where content's going to live. Third thing is content attributes. So what data facets in your content are most important to you now? And what are going to be most important to you in the future if you can predict it? So if you're starting in IG and perhaps going to legal or going to HR, you can kind of guess what those important content attributes are going to be for those groups. So you can kind of get that right off the bat as you're kind of going through implementation. You know, how much content do you have? You know, what are your different content types? Maybe it's very heavy, you know, cash flow statements, maybe it's contracts. Having an understanding, of course, auto classification is going to help you with that, but also having an understanding of what's important to your organization or what's important to your group as you go through this process will be helpful as well. And then the fourth one is thinking about internal operations or workflows or the ability to automate these workflows. So, you know, if it's I'll use a search request as an example, whether it's a DSAR, something for litigation, or I'm just looking for the latest version of contract X. What is your plan for either automation versus self-serve? Are we going to have certain people who can go in and access and have full reign access and searchability? Or do we need to redact certain things from certain people? Or do we want to automate those processes? So, you know, if it's something that comes out once a month, hey, Jen, here is all the rot that's in your inbox or, you know, in your data stores this month, do something with it. You know, however you want to handle those internal operations, that's something to kind of think about as you're going through those planning phases. And then kind of second level considerations, once those are kind of out of the way, think about, you know, overcoming gotchas, because there's always going to be some, and anticipating either objections from other groups or anticipating some issues that may come up will help you overcome those when they arise. So that initial cost versus ROI over time, and that's where those calculators are going to really help you make that case there. Understanding time to implement. So, you know, you didn't accumulate, you know, 2 terabytes of data overnight, and you're not going to scan it overnight either. So understanding, respecting the time that it's going to take technology to go through and do a content analysis of your data stores is important. Having the right people, having the right training of those people, and then being able to kind of go out and spread the word and evangelize throughout the organization, that's important as well. And who are going to be your champions and who are going to help you kind of get through all those, you know, tasks and stuff over the line. Also kind of with that, keeping those eyes forward, you know, finding other use cases outside of the common use cases, or maybe perhaps outside the one that got you in the door and said, yes, you know, we've got it, here's the budget, here's the plan. What are those other areas that you can bring in? And then trying to use IT tools to solve the challenge. So that's quite often, that is some objections we hear from other groups when we're chatting with clients, is IT says, well, you know, we've got the search functionality in 365, or we have, you know, we can search by, you know, keyword or whatever in this app or this program that we're using. And quite often IT has been using that to kind of get around that. But something to think about is that is an objection you may hear, and it can be very limited into what it can do. So having an auto classification solution that's going to look through, you know, every single piece of content in every data store is obviously important. So also something to think about where things can go wrong. So over promising results without a proof of concept exercise, it's not magic. It really isn't. It is machine learning. It is a technology that goes through it. It's a software platform. So it needs time to learn, just like anything else. And it needs instructions and rules, just as if you were going to have a new employee sit next to you and say, okay, well, this is a contract and this is what it looks like. Well, show me what a contract looks like. So there is that process of, you know, teaching, not you personally teaching the technology, but the technology learning about what other things are. So underestimating that machine learning process, something to watch for. Obligations for time commitments. We kind of talked about this a little earlier, is respecting people's time and their time budget, and, you know, how much time they have to spend around the table. And then again, thinking about that further looking beyond just what I'm doing now, and building a solution, an enterprise-wide solution, an operation and workflow that's going to have real business value for many folks across your organization. So actioning policies, automating stuff, you know, real important or real, you know, data facets or auto classification tags that are going to mean and have importance for different groups. You know, perhaps it's legal, perhaps it's privacy. Another thing here is this third one here is getting past older taxonomies for managing and retrieving content. Quite often, and there was an interesting article that we read not too long ago about this new generation, the youngins, having this idea and not having this idea of foldering and taxonomy in their head when they're talking about saving things. So kind of getting past this idea of it has to live in a folder in this hierarchy with this path is another way of kind of thinking about managing content. So it doesn't matter where it lives. It doesn't matter that I need to go to, you know, country code, contract, client, whatever. It's just a new way or a different way of thinking about managing content without those kind of foldering or taxonomies. And then managing content like it's a financial portfolio. You know, taking it seriously, making sure that everything's checking and balanced at the end, and that there's everything that is in there should be there and is required to be there, and the things that you know, that need to be protected and maybe need to be locked down are, you know, sequestered and protected accordingly. So those are just kind of some things to think about as you think about implementing and ongoing. So kind of to wrap up then, so for that project planning and readiness, I think, you know, what we'll see, what we did here was kind of build your case. You know, do you have your needs assessment? Do you understand what you need as an organization? And then what's the risk, and play on it? Building your team, getting the right stakeholders, you know, to build that collaboration with your teams and the different groups to get buy-in. Building your budget. Where can you find savings where you're already spending money in your organization, and find that quickest path to ROI? And again, those ROI calculators will help you in determining that. And then building your plan. You know, once you've got everything in place, you know, how do you get that project up on solid footing, prioritize objectives, and have a phased rollout with different phases and different groups in your organization. Get in contact with Sandy or I. Our contact information is here. We welcome any questions after the fact. I will send out a link to the recording of this and the slides, and I will also send out that ROI calculator so that you can put your own values in and you can play around with it and really see the potential there for that. And also, I would encourage you, if you haven't done already and you'd like to see a demo of the platform, please reach out and let us know, and we can certainly make that happen for you. Or if you just kind of want to brainstorm to say, you know, this is my situation, this is where I sit in my organization, how do I kind of get that collaboration internally? We're happy to sit down and have a bit of a brainstorming session with you to see, you know, how best to approach it in your situation, in your organization. Cool. Well, if we don't have any questions, that's awesome. I thank you, everyone, for joining today. Again, I will send this out to you. If you've got questions, reach out, and I wish everyone a lovely day. Take care, everyone.